Very large, Madam Chair.
Morning, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. This is March 1st. Yikes, Wednesday, March 1st. It's coming in like a lamb.
Yeah.
We're taking up this morning, we've got Department of Buildings and General Services with us. We're going to continue our markup, but we did have some questions in section 1, which dealt with BGS. And we have Joe Asia with us. And Joe, I will turn it over to you, and if you could introduce yourself.
Good morning, Joe Asia, Director for Design and Construction, Director of Design and Construction for Buildings and General Services. I've got some quick notes here, nothing I've sent up, so I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right.
Yep. Sounds good.
Now you can.
Recording in progress.
First up was major maintenance.
Major maintenance, and people wanted to know what the list was. And I had a question, there was a question offline last evening about why are we paying for major maintenance with bonded dollars when it's just maintenance of a building? Maybe someone could think about that and address that. Okay?
All right.
That's a great question.
So what I have here is a list for you that is going to show our encumbered projects for major maintenance. And encumbered is that the projects have been assigned to project managers. The funding has been for their projects given to them to start, whether it's design and construction or just construction. And so I'll run through the quick list of that, and then what we'll get to is our deferred major maintenance projects. These are the ones that are coming in through our WIMS system, our computer system for work orders, and they're sitting out there to be assessed. We are assessing globally for our district facility managers on a bi-yearly basis. So we do it in January, February, and then again in July, August, we'll go through, sit down with them. Depends on what we have for funding, the top 5, top 10, top 20, top 30. And so I'll run through that. It's an exhaustive list for both, but I can show you what I've got. How does that look on the screen?
Can you make those a little bigger?
How's that?
Oh, that's better.
All right. So what we have here is one of the encumbered projects, the fiscal year that we have been using. Now, we have had a backlog due to Irene, and we are catching up quite well with these days. So I have 3 fiscal years. Then I have it broken down to the building or buildings that is taking place, the work order number, and then the actual work that is being done. There are multiple projects sometimes listed inside of a building. When we have the opportunity, we bundle the projects. So if there's a lot of site work that has to be done, foundation work, something like that, we would bundle it with a excavating for a general contractor. But if there's like excavating work and painting, we probably will do that separately. So a good example of a bundling of project is 10 and 12 Baldwin right down here. We did do a handicap ramp. We also were doing the roof on 10 Baldwin, replacing the roof on 10 and 12 Baldwin and repainting 10. So all that's going on, and that was a bundled project.
So Joe, we have a question. Tristan?
I think I just wanted to comment because it was a note from the last time we talked about this and helped me put this in context. When you say that a backlog from Irene and catching up, that means you're catching up. It means we're still you're doing a lot of extra projects right now that were deferred, correct?
The projects were not deferred. We were not, because of the project managers and that whole timing, we had 3.5 project managers working on Waterbury alone.
Right.
So we fell behind in getting our major maintenance work done. We are now doing quite well at getting projects out the door and completed for major maintenance. So we had a backlog of 5, and we are now catching up.
Okay, so you're more in a level.
Yes.
And when we had that backlog, they didn't even have any, they didn't do any major maintenance projects. So what we did with the capital building, we ended up either directing those dollars we put towards major maintenance of BGS, we recouped those dollars and moved them somewhere else for a year or two.
We reallocated, I think, $12 million
Yeah.
1 year because we were backlogged. We were getting 10 million a year, I believe, for major
I
maintenance.
don't know if you're ever getting that high. Are we getting that high?
I thought at that point in time we were getting there, and that just right before Irene, and then it went downhill.
Yeah, I don't
And then
remember.
we were at 6, 7, 8 now, a little bit extra cash, hopefully.
Wayne?
You're not able to leverage any federal money with any of this?
No, this is all bonded funds we got. I don't know of any way to leverage federal funds.
So a lot of these projects are roof repairs, heating system repairs. Like on 128, I see a porch repair. I mean, these are normal construction items that would occur when you're doing a big project, like a line item that we have if you're building an addition to one of our state office buildings, or you're building a new courthouse. I mean, you're gonna be putting on a roof, you're gonna be doing a boiler system, you're gonna be putting in bathrooms, so, and windows and all of that. So that's what a lot of these projects are here. It's just they haven't come up to the level of a line item in a capital bill, and I think that level is either 250 or $500,000.
I'm on that cap at 700,000 right now.
700,000. When a major maintenance project kicks up to that level, then it kicks into a specific line item for that project.
Eric Kilcorn, BGS, I just wanted to say one more thing about that $700,000 cap. Sometimes you'll see on a particular building, there will be a half dozen projects, the boiler, the roof, the blah, 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 and we might try to bundle those together as a single project. And we sometimes do butt up against if we do it all, we hit the 700,000 mark and it becomes a line item in a different conversation. So we are, to some degree, I wouldn't say trying to stay under the radar, but
Right.
have manageable packages that are efficient.
Right, and I want to say right now, where there's 3 projects that are similar to that. Our largest one would be at Southern State Correctional Facility, and that's further down in this list, where I think we are 1.2 million, I think, of major maintenance funds. But the reason for that is we're doing the door control project. We are vacating a complete living unit at a time. And so we're going in there and doing a lot of repairs and replacements of parts to the toilet control system, to painting, repair the floor, stuff like that. Some lighting upgrades. So all of that is in there. If it wasn't part of the door control project at the time, because we didn't know enough at that point in time how much had to be addressed under the major maintenance. So that's where that, it looks bigger, but it's really is multiple projects that we're now bringing together because we got a living unit that's empty. In that case, multiple living units at a time, and that's how we're doing it now.
Commissioner?
Good morning. For the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch, Commissioner BGS. So to also add to the response, Representative Roberts, so what is new in our process that's allowing us to do more work than we've done before is our retainer contract process, which they started around the time that I came in 2017. But we've been working, as we learn, right, and grow, we've been working with the Office of Purchasing and Contracting, and we're able to leverage those contracts and raise those dollar limits, which gets us to 750 that Joe was just mentioning. So by able to be using the retainer contracts, we can get work done much more quickly because we already have people under contract, and that means that we don't have to wait the X amount of months to put out a formal bid, right? Get those bid responses back and execute a contract. That takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months depending on the size and scope and scale of the project. So by using the retainers, we don't have to do that because we already have people under contract. And so that's allowing us to do that work more quickly. The only other one that I wanted to reference, a good local example of major maintenance that's right here next to us is the Pink Lady. So we're going to be doing the roof and the porch, and we're also resetting the stairs on the Pink Lady and at 2 Aiken as well. Great example of major maintenance projects.
John and then Mary?
The correctional facility door and when you're going into the units and doing painting, cleanup, you do that with your own staff or do you do bundle that with the contractor?
Or you bundle it with a contractor. Some stuff is done by our own staff if they have the time and the wherewithal to do it. It's like the control work on the toilets. because it's a remote control thing, they can do that. And then what major maintenance doing is we are purchasing the parts for them, and then they're installing them when they do.
Mary, and then Tristan.
So I just wanted to, where the blue line is, the money amount over on this side, is that what has been allocated, the overall amount?
Allocated and or spent, because some of these projects like this one here, 2 Governor Aiken Avenue, the windows that we did over there are already done. We replaced the casement windows 4 years ago. So I think that those funds then have been spent, but these are the projects that are still out there when I'm running this report. But yes, so the blue line is the building, and then the money that went to that, then we broken that down below what it actually went to.
So some of the $18 million total is not in your lines.
Not here, I have an encumbered one that will be I can show you a little bit later.
This is FY '21. This is money on
This is money
previous
that we
capital
just
plans.
spent. And so what I did was I ran the list to show you, these are the types of projects that we're doing. So Berry Courthouse, we're doing DDC, that's direct digital control, so that we can control the return air unit, the RTU, and the items like that. So here in this room, we've got a sensor on the wall that senses whether or not it's getting too warm or too cold, and or CO detection, and modulates the amount of air coming into the room.
So Joe, we have another question. Tristan?
Thank you. I think it's a good question for the commissioner, not necessarily for this year's budget, but talking about contract process. And in your view, could there be further efficiencies or to be gained in looking at a contracting process and getting more contract? We know that there are hurdles to doing business with the state. Contractors have more projects to choose from than ever right now.
You are 110% correct. So there are lots of things. So Bulletin 3.5 is what we use in the executive branch, and that's basically, if you want to give it a good title, it's our contracting Bible. So that's the process that we have to follow, and there's also statutory language related to Bulletin 3.5. We did do a lean event. So a lean event, if folks don't know, is a process of basically putting a process on a wall and determining where the waste is in that process and trying to eliminate waste. In addition to doing that, we also got feedback from the contracting community, specifically AGC, which is the Association of General Contractors. And then we did get some feedback from some other groups as well. So we are in the process right now of streamlining to the vast extent that we can in the state of Vermont executive branch, again, because we do have a lot of requirements. But we are trying to streamline that process, create greater transparency. And one of the things that we've recommended to the Agency of Administration, who oversees Bulletin 3.5 at large, is to raise some of the limits. So we heard about that today. When we started retainer contracts, I think we're around 30,000 and 150 maybe.
We're at 50,000 for
We're
all
at
of them.
50,000 at all of them, and we've been slowly raising those limits. And I think there's always a concern about how high is that limit in terms of our ability to manage and make sure that we're not taking advantage of that opportunity, right? And what we found is, what we're learning is that we can keep raising those limits and make sure that we are still doing all the oversight that's needed to manage those properly, even though those limits are getting higher. The other thing that we've done is we have a lower limit and a higher limit. The goal there is for newer people coming into the community, we want to help grow businesses. So we have a lower dollar amount to help them get off the ground, to get used to working with the state, get used to our processes, and then over time, we're hoping that we can help grow them and raise those limits so they can get bigger projects from the state of Vermont. So again, we kind of bin you into one or two categories. That's how BGS does it. Every group does it differently. I still think there's additional opportunities, in my personal opinion, to make contracting with the state of Vermont even easier. And we're always looking for folks to give us feedback and input on what they see as the barriers and hurdles to see if we can reduce or eliminate any of those.
Thank you.
John, and then we're going to keep moving because this is the first item, folks.
Do you solicit and entertain value engineering?
Yes, but value engineering really should be done up front during your design phase, but usually when you go out to bid and you're trying to reduce your price, the contractor has always got the upper hand when you look into value engineer, because you really can't see what that return of the value is. And you're looking at cutting things to bring the project in on budget. And so sometimes when you value engineer, you do lose things that you wish you did not. But that's the only way to get the project done. But yes, we do evaluate that.
It's an oxymoron.
In a way, it is. Value engineering should be done during the design phase. But the problem there is we still have issues with our design estimate versus actual bid day.
So let's keep moving through. Let's go, these are all encumbered and this is from FY '21 dollars. So that gives the committee a feel for what projects are being done with our major maintenance. And then, yeah. No, still, and then the next one is deferred maintenance.
Is our deferred maintenance. So these are the ones that are sitting there as work orders right now. Now, if it comes through as an emergency or high priority, like a roof leak, it's not on this list because we actually move forward to get that work done. These are the ones that are sitting out there that we're looking at right now and to assign to project managers. So we have at 1 Baldwin, there's a parking lot repair. Should we do that? So we have to look at that, and this looks like it's just a quick pave over the top and level some of it. 10 Baldwin, asbestos floor, replace that. 10 Taylor, we're looking at replacing the siding on the building. 108 Cherry Street, that won't be done. 109, we have replaced carpet in the governor's area. That is actually original carpet from when that addition was done in the mid-80s. Replace the outdated tiles that we can no longer get, so there's ceiling tiles that were specified way back then in '86 that are no longer available. And what we're doing is we're emptying out one office and reusing those tiles to backfill certain other areas. 11 Green Mountain Drive.
We have a question. Gina?
So all the stuff for 108 Cherry is in this 18.5 right now? All the stuff for 108 Cherry that's noted on his list is included in the 18.5 that we're showing.
They're not, they may not do that if the
Okay.
building's gonna be up.
So
for
it wasn't
sale.
in the ask?
No,
Okay.
no,
So
this is
oh, it's
deferred,
listed, right.
and then they're gonna rate that. So if a building is if a building's being proposed to be sold, that's where they make that judgment. It's this imminent that it really has to be done. The building's gonna be sold. That's the balance. Even though it's on a deferred maintenance list, doesn't mean they're gonna go ahead and do it.
Right, and like that building that's potentially going to be sold, that's a tough one on what you have to do also.
Yeah.
You do spend money sometimes knowing that it's going to be sold, but it's about safety, security, or saving the building.
Sure.
Let's keep going. I don't want to get into the weeds here. I just want the committee to have an overall feel of how major maintenance is used, because we're in markup. So there's 8 million being requested, bonded dollars in FY '24, 8 million in '25, and then there's an additional 2 million from cash. So the question is the 8 million for bonded dollars the appropriate number? And people wanted to know a little bit more what major maintenance projects are out there. So do you have a list of what some proposed projects might be for the 8 million?
That's these right here. My editing skills though have failed me.
What's failed you?
My editing skills.
Oh,
It's a common
So,
theme this year.
I know. So unfortunately, I do have a backup. So we have here, it was that same list. I only brought in page 1. So as we're going down through, this book, 115 State Street, these are all the items that are listed. Just because they're listed does not mean that we're going to be able to get to them, but we should start looking at these things. 115 being the State House. 116, sidewalk repairs, carpentry.
so that's not showing up. Are you controlling it or is
It's not showing up?
the screen
You
isn't
may not be
moving?
moving as fast as you are.
Not moving.
It says I'm sharing my screen.
It's not moving. We're stuck
It
at
just may mean that
109.
There's a delay between the computer and the.
Or is the window highlighted? Are you in a
That could-
web browser
that
now?
could
or-
be.
Is that deferred maintenance on your computer?
Yes,
You chose.
yes,
As a matter of
it
fact.
is. Maybe you could
Stop the
stop the
share
share.
So while-
Go.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
while Joe's trying to figure that out, I also just want to remind the committee that in your books, it talks about major maintenance and the amount of money that we should be investing based on the value of our buildings. And I just want to point out to the committee that based on that chart, we're not investing enough. And the reason why that's important is because anytime we defer maintenance, and I know this is called deferred maintenance, but the longer we put off maintenance, the more expensive it's going to be for two reasons. One, the time value of money, right? Things get expensive over time in general. But the second thing is the worse something deteriorates, generally speaking, the more expensive it's going to be to replace in the future. So, and it also puts us into an emergency situation where something could die unplanned, and then we have an emergency on our hands. So I just want to point out that what we're asking for is actually below, in theory, what we should be asking for in investing for buildings every day.
So they're making their case.
That's right.
Okay, folks, they're making their case. You don't have, you can agree with it or you don't have to agree with it.
That's right.
You still have the ability to move some money around. The administration's gonna make their case and support the governor's budget. Just wanna put that on the table. Doesn't mean we have to go there. Okay? And here comes one of the big guns for the administration, because they don't want us to fool around with their budget. I love to pull your chain, Sean.
Oh, that's all right. So this is what the list is. Again, these are the ones that we are assigning now and looking to do. Not all of these, though, will be assigned because of what may be going on with the future renovations of the project, or something else is a greater priority. Because when I get to the bottom, sorry about the eyes,
No, that's all right.
I'm at 10.5 million for 6 months.
Mhm.
And I don't have that.
Yep. How much do you have left from the past 2 years? How much is encumbered on that? 'Cause you did
I
the,
don't have an actual number because we were chasing those last night with touring things up for the RICO committee.
okay,
So I'll have that then.
okay.
But we program projects every 6 months, right, Joe?
Yes.
Right.
So, and it's based on, what needs to be done, what can get done in that season, and also whether or not I have funding. And that ebbs and flows throughout the year because there's things that come up that have to get done. So then other projects that are not as high a priority, even though they've been assigned, get spunked out.
So what you just listed for the deferred projects, when you said for 6 months, you're seeing a 10.5 million. Would any of the FY 22-23 dollars be going to that, or is that what you're projecting for FY 24?
This is FY 23.
It's FY 23, we put in 7 million for you last year. So that 7 million for FY 23 would be going towards some of these deferred maintenance projects?
But like one of them was on the list was the Big E.
Yeah.
There were 5 or 6 items for the Big E that we're gonna try and get done under the Big E project that's going on. Because while contractors in there, we're gonna get the best value for that.
Right. So that's what I want to make sure with the committee. All these projects that were listed for deferred maintenance, that 10.5, the intent is this is the FY 23 capital budget, and we put 7 million in there, 7 point, what did we put in the end, 7.3. 7 million at the end. Started out at 7.3 and we ended up at 7. So that 7 million will go towards some of these projects. Does that make sense for folks? Okay, Michelle?
So I just have a quick question, and it's probably too late to ask, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. I noticed when you were scrolling by items on there, one of them was new sinks and some things in the staff bathrooms at CRCF. And when I visited there recently, there was a request that it would be really great to have a staff shower. Would it be possible, if you're working with the plumbing in the staff bathrooms, to figure in making a shower for staff? Or is it?
Possibly, it's not too late. We'd have to look at that. I don't know, obviously it's not a work order right now. So I don't think that has trickled down, or corrections should put that in the work order and say, we'd like one and we can evaluate that.
So who should send a message to who? Because I'd be happy to follow up with the people that spoke.
In the WIM system, we
Yeah.
have a work order.
Yeah.
So there's a website you go to.
Yeah.
And you put the work order right in there, and then once that's done, it'll go to operations and maintenance. They evaluate and say they can or cannot do it, and if they cannot do it, it then comes to my shop. and then it gets on the list.
I think the question is, where do you get the order, where do you get the direction from? I believe it's from DOC.
That would be
DOC needs to ask BGS, can you look at this and put something in? That's the level that Michelle's asking.
Yeah, and there are other times when there's a walk by, somebody mentions it to operations or maintenance, they go to one of my project managers, and we put it through.
I'm happy to send a text over to DOC and
Directly.
ask if it's a need to please enter a work order, so I can do that.
Thank you, I would appreciate that.
So are we clear on the major maintenance for this, for the committee? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go to our next item, which was, what I have listed is the HVAC system in the State House. That's where you folks are headed next. I'm trying to get the cash flow and what can anticipate it being done, what's left over from what was spent from last year's appropriation, because I know we wanted to buy equipment, we wanted to get a jump start. Supply chain issues, we haven't been able to do that. So I wanted more clarity, or we wanted more clarity, because we have put in, so far, for the HVAC system in the last 2 years, 6.8 million for the State House HVAC system. Okay.
So we got some colors coming up on this. The green was the original ask and what we were working on until we get to December 6th in 2021. At that point in time, that is when we got a directive from the governor asking if we could step up any part of this process. So at that point in time, things in the timeline shifted. So design and development was still going on, but what we're able to do is on the 17th, that was sorry about that. On December 17th, we worked with our design team and said, what could we move forward with on the quickest? And that was the HVAC air handling unit in the basement of the Senate. And what we're looking to do then is we started work on that. When we're racing to get that work done, we jumped into design development. And this program was going on, and then construction documents to get that unit. So that unit was supposed to be here early to mid-fall 2022. However, it was not going to show up until sometime in January, and it's still in the factory. So our intent is to get that work done this coming summer.
And that would take care of this floor, or you're back just dealing with the
Phase A
Senate?
is just the Senate.
Just the Senate. So we're still at phase A.
For that portion, yes. And then what we do is we get into, on the same point in time, once we had our construction documents done for phase A, we went back to finish, which now is known as the design development and construction documents for phase B and C. Phase B is the House chambers, Senate chambers, all flags, and all the committee rooms here in the south in this room that we're in here. Phase C was the mezzanine and the cafeteria. And we developed that phase at the same time, only because of the amount of air handling units that we looked at being able to replace during that point in time.
So right now, you did what you're foreseeing for this spring and summer and fall. You'll have the equipment for phase A, you're calling, for work under the Senate and for the Senate committee rooms in the first floor. So you have the equipment for that now, or you will?
We are hoping to. We don't have a ship date, so these manufacturers won't give you a ship date until they know they can ship it. We're calling every week. We're reminding them we have an order in the system. Given that it was supposed to be here in November, we are hopeful that it will show up. We were about
Supposed to show
6
up in
months
May.
delayed in Essex, so if we're 6 months delayed here, that puts us in April, maybe.
I would like it here. I'd like to sit in one of our buildings, so I had it on hand to replace it, and we can't do the work when you go home.
Right. So right now, you're hoping to have the equipment by April or
I mean, I'm just comparing how long it took in Essex. It was about a 6 month delay. So if I use that 6 month delay here, that's when it would arrive, but we don't have a ship date yet. So we can't say anything really until we have a ship date.
Right. So,
Where does it ship from?
Say that
Where does
again?
it ship from?
I don't recall.
I don't know
where
who
it
the
is.
vendor is myself, but we can get back to you
I
on that.
don't.
I'm just curious.
No.
John?
Will any of the work that's gonna happen on the HVAC project be affected by the study that we talked about a few days ago as far as reconfiguring space?
Phase B.
Well, no, that's sort of the reddish maroon color that I have on the slide that's up here right now. So perhaps, under phase B, we have completed 50, well, now we're almost 100% complete in our construction documents. We have a construction manager on board for this. The construction manager took the air handling units that the designers had selected several weeks ago and reached out to one contracting firm, one supplier, and said, what's the ship date on these units? Air handling unit 1, 2, and 3, which handles the House and Senate chambers and Hall of Flags, is 20 weeks out from the date that we order.
And that is for which ones? That's for the
Air handler 1, 2, and 3,
No, but-
House
house?
chambers, Senate chambers, Hall of Flags,
Okay.
that area out to the Cedar Creek room. Governor's office, the likes of that. That is 20 weeks out. We believe we will have our CM contractor be able to get those ordered in time.
It'll be 20 weeks from the time that you order to the time you get it.
We're just, the design has to be complete enough that we have the specifications to actually order the correct unit.
But the caveat there is, right, we've been ordering these units and we're told we're gonna get them by a certain date and everything's been delayed in the HVAC world. COVID, lots of demand on the supply. So while we have a 20-week estimate today, all I'm trying to do is a caveat to say, maybe we get it in 20 weeks, maybe we don't, right? Because again, we were supposed to get the first unit in November. So I just wanna make sure I'm setting reasonable expectations about when we actually think we can get there. So right now, 20 weeks is what we were told, and we can use that number, but
And we may get a different date, the day that we place the order.
So you haven't placed the order yet?
No, because we're still finishing up the construction documents on that.
And when do you anticipate finishing up those construction documents?
March 3rd.
Oh, at the end of the week.
Hopefully. I haven't heard.
The day after tomorrow.
So hopefully, if this is a 20-week shipping date, and hopefully for phase 1, that equipment is a 20-week. So hopefully they both be coming in at about the same time.
Correct.
And then over the summer and fall, you would be doing the first phase, phase A, and getting started on phase 2.
Phase B we have to get the equipment, so I'm not gonna do any demolition until the equipment is here. So once it arrives, we'll decide how much we can do, and then there's an option out here with agreement.
So I'm gonna stop you there. How much of the 6.8 million that we've already put in for this project has been expended or encumbered?
The amount that we need to do just the Senate area, and I forget exactly what that dollar amount is. It's probably close to $500,000-600,000 for the work that we have for phase A, not
That
including
includes-
my design. I don't recall what the.
You get 6.8 million in the bank. I wanna know how much of that has been encumbered.
we can, if Joe doesn't have that
I
value
don't
today,
have that
we can bring
encumbered
that back to you, that's
We
not a
need
problem.
that.
Absolutely.
That's really important. Everybody's gonna be looking at this project for our colleagues. And I wanna have firm numbers here because if we do any cut to FY '24, we're gonna have to have some pretty solid information to back it up. Because the perception is gonna be we're slowing it down. But on the other hand, if you can't get those dollars out the door in FY '24, why are we tying up that money when we could either put it somewhere else or put it towards FY '25? Because I'm looking at cash flow.
Understood. What I don't have is a solid estimate from the construction manager telling me what phase B and C will cost. So that's also sort of coming hand in hand with pricing the job.
I believe we can come back though and give you some estimates, Madam Chair, both what's been obligated and what we believe we can spend.
And with that, we'll also be ordering air handling units 5 and 6. 5 and 6 to the House committee rooms.
And what is the order time for that?
When we asked about 1, 2, and 3, it was 40 weeks for those units.
1, 2, and 3, I thought it was 20.
It was 20 weeks, yes. And then at the same time, we had asked about 4 and 5. The feedback we had from the one manufacturer was 40 weeks from the time they were placed the order.
So is that 4, 5, and 6, or just 4 and 5?
Just 5 and 6.
Wait a minute.
Right? Sorry.
Numbers are off.
Yes, they are. Sorry. 1, 2, and 3 are 20 weeks. 4 and 5.
40 weeks out.
No, I'm right. Sorry. 4's out of it. 4 is the air handler that goes to the Senate. 1, 2, and 3, House and Senate chambers. 5 and 6 feed the House committee rooms.
So is it, okay.
The 5 and 6, we heard from just the one when we reached out, was 40 weeks. We still have to bid these out.
So 40 weeks, that brings us into the fall, way into December. So there wouldn't be any way you would be able to do these committee rooms until a year from this spring, calendar year 2024, 23, right? So calendar year 24. You wouldn't even get started. So for next session, we would not have the air handling systems for these committee rooms if it's 40 weeks out.
The work that will take place that we're looking at is last year, right before you went home, we had 2 products we were looking at, propane and air heat exchanger. We added a 3rd, water-to-water heat exchanger, and we just sent that up last week.
Yeah, but you're talking about,
2 different things.
I know, but that's
I don't want-
part of it.
I know, I don't want to
Okay.
confuse the committee with
So
that,
let's go one
please.
step at a time. So to
Yes.
answer your question directly, and we talked about this last week, right? We can bring in the air handler units and we can install them. We can do that regardless of any of the work that gets done on the ventilation inside this building, right? And what Joe said is we could either increase the airflow, because these will have the capacity to do that, but it's gonna be noisier in your committees, or we can dial them back, so it's the same airflow you're getting today, the new units. Those can be installed regardless of whatever work may need to be done in the walls or with the other units.
Would you have that equipment when it's a 40-week schedule for getting it? And the time you order, which you're not going to order probably for another month, but you still have more design documents to do, correct?
They're almost done.
They're almost done.
Supposed to be done by Friday. So,
Even those are supposed to be done by Friday?
the construction documents, yes, and then they're gonna go to we have an internal review, goes to the construction manager. And if we can order the units, we will pre-order those units.
And that would be unit 5 and 6.
1, 2,
And
3,
three.
5, and 6.
And the 5 and 6 could be a 40-week shipping.
That's what we heard from one manufacturer. We have not actually bid that work out.
So that brings you to December
Mhm.
to get so would you be able to do any work to install any of those while we're in session for 5 and 6?
No.
No.
However. And I don't want to confuse things, but that is where I was headed. Was the water-to-water heat exchanger needs an addition to the mechanical room on the first floor. That work can be done this summer.
So let's slow that down.
Yeah, we got to, because that's something new for the committee.
Yes, so what
Okay.
Joe is talking about is that we need to add what we call a summertime boiler. Because we have to super cool the air to get the moisture out, to then heat it back up to an air conditioned temperature. It kind of sounds silly, but that's how it works, is you bring out the air when it's really, or bring out the water when it's really, really cold. Right now, we don't have the capacity to heat it back up, because the only thing we have is the heat plant, and that doesn't run during the summer. So as part of this project, right, and remember several years ago, we had mold inside the State House during the summertime. And it was $500,000 to remediate it, so we don't wanna go back through that again. So we know we have to take the air out, or the moisture out of the air. So to do that, we need to put in what's called a summertime boiler. Last session, we proposed 2 options, and we basically left it to the legislature to select which one they wanted, because they were very close to each other. One was an electric heat pump, and the other one was a propane boiler, if I remember correctly. And the life cycle cost won out on the propane boiler, that 20-year life cycle that we've talked about several times. But it was so close to the electric heat pump, and there's a lot of support right now from the legislature, right, to be green, which is great. So we brought it to the committee to select which one they wanted, and they said, we don't want to select it right now, we want you to go back and do some more homework. So we've done that. There was language, Madam Chair, I believe, added last year. So we addressed that language, and we have looked at 3 options, and we just sent last week the results of that 20-year assessment, 20-year life cycle, on the 3 options that you could choose from. We do have one that we have our eyes on, and we can make a recommendation to the committee. That's what Joe's talking about. So that's additional work that can be done this summer, is the summertime boiler, which we were hoping to do last summer, but we didn't choose which unit we wanted. So that's why we're focusing on this summer.
So would that work, that's independent of the work that's being done for the Senate rooms this summer, correct? So that's kind of a standalone, just trying to lay the groundwork for the committee. That is a standalone in terms of pulling the moisture out of the air during the summer because of the humidity. And we'll have to talk about what system that you focused on, but what's the delay in getting that equipment? Whatever system we work on, we decide.
That I don't know yet.
So you don't know if you'd even be able to do it this summer because the
Well, we still have to discuss whether or not you approve the water to water heat pump versus the electric heat pump, air heat pump.
So depending on which option is chosen, and there are 3, there is some work that needs to be done to house the unit that we are recommending, which would require us to do some construction this summer to be able to house it.
And that, to house it, would be near where the current room is down by the courtyard?
That is correct.
Is it bumping out into the courtyard?
Yes, it is.
Very much?
It would be just a 1/2 inch shy of the brickwork that's there now. There's a bump out that goes
Yep.
to the connector,
Yep.
going to the mezzanine area, the co-room. So historic preservation does not want us to face it exactly, so we're just shy a little bit, so it does look like its own separate addition.
We've got to deal with
Yeah.
this. We're going to deal with that separate here. Wayne?
So what I'm trying to, given your timelines and things being late, obviously you need to, and you can, it seems, buy the handling units and the other hardware that you need, even if you couldn't install it, because it's part of the plan, you could warehouse it until you were able to do that. So my question, what I'm trying to see is, I think what we need to know is, given the timeline holdup so far, what proportions of construction costs that are not gonna go on during, what is the proportion of the budget that may be actual construction costs that will not be achieved within fiscal year that we're looking at money for?
But we got 6.8 to go towards Phase A and the equipment purchase of Phase B. We already put money aside for that. So the construction for Phase A is already covered in that 6.8 million. And then the purchasing of the equipment, the air handling 5 and 6, is covered in that 6.8, but not the construction. I don't believe the construction was involved
So the construction should be in there.
in the 6.8.
Yes.
So we front-loaded it last year because we wanted to push this project along.
So as we promised, Madam Chair, we will give you what's obligated to date, and then using the schedule that Joe has laid out, and again, right, this is our best vision forward based on what we know today. In the HVAC world is not predictable, in terms of supply chain. So we will do our very best to give you what we've obligated to date, and what we believe we can spend, and we will bring that number back to the committee based on the schedule that Joe has here on the screen.
So figure out how much you got encumbered and tied up with the 6.8. And then there's 3.7 plus that's being requested in FY '24. And can any of those dollars get out the door in FY '24? That's the key. John?
Clarify for me, are we buying the equipment or are we authorizing the CM, gotta have a CM in place, we're authorizing that?
We're authorizing the construction manager to replace, purchase.
We're not purchasing anything.
No.
Joe's been using "we" a little bit liberally. What he means is the construction manager. So the construction manager is actually the one that will go out and try to get bids from 3 HVAC suppliers.
A lot cleaner.
And so that will all be part of the contract.
But it's we, the state.
I know, I get it, it's just sometimes I do the same thing, I say "we" all the time, and I just have to be more specific about what we mean.
So if you got those air handling systems 5 and 6, in the fall of this year, would you have time to install those before we come back in January?
Possibly.
Possibly.
When they arrive and
Because what
it's done.
I'm just thinking here, you could install those, and then you said because the ductwork would not be able to handle the high volume of air coming through, you
Correct,
could dial it back,
that's correct.
but it would not help our airflow in these committee rooms, even though you have installed the new handlers, until you increase that ductwork.
That's because we need to increase the airflow in a small, as confined space, it's gonna get louder, that's the issue.
So if, this is where it gets so complicated, it's like the chicken and egg situation. Because if you increase that ductwork, if we do an addition, which we're not gonna know if we're gonna do an addition for at least another year, we don't know what we're gonna do with these current committee rooms, if we're gonna move the walls out or not. If we don't do an addition and people want a higher airflow, you've got a air handling system that can handle a higher airflow, but the ductwork can't. So to increase that ductwork without an addition, you've got to widen up some of these walls, which then takes away committee space.
Correct.
Will the committee follow on that one? So the question is, do you go ahead and install those air handling systems before we even figure out what we're doing with an expansion? Do we keep what we have? Or do we put in an air handling system that is a higher capacity, knowing in the future, we're gonna do an addition at some point, and then you get the mechanical in there, part of it, and live with the current ductwork that we have, but then we're back to having 9, 10, 11 tied up, committee rooms. And we're back to having room in the pavilion for at least another couple sessions. At least.
Remember, this all started with, we were just gonna switch out the air handler units, right? We weren't going to increase the airflow, and then that wouldn't lead to increasing duct size. And I say that because, again, my understanding, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know better than I do, my understanding is we could put the new units in, we would just keep it at the current airflow that you have now. So my recommendation to the committee would be to allow those units to be installed, because we can still deal with the walls and do all of those things at a later date, depending on obviously how all of these things move forward. But I don't think there's any harm in putting the units on the top of the roof. You're not wasting anything. You're just not increasing the airflow because we're not increasing the duct size.
Different units. 7 and 8 on the roof.
Okay.
And 7 and 8 are more for the cafeteria in the expansion. Eric.
I'm realizing this project has been discussed as long as I've been at BGS now, like, it had been my first year. The original intent was to deal with the mold problem in the building.
Yeah, right,
And so
yeah.
the summer boiler and the air handlers will fix the original problem we were trying to
That's
fix. And the ductwork is still, a little bit speculative depending upon what the long-term plan is for the building, but just wanted to remind us where we started.
Okay, so I'm gonna move this along. So we need to know how much the 6.8 that you've had in the past, and we also put money prior to FY
That's
22 and
okay.
23. So
We'll give you all of that.
we need to know what's left, because that will help us to determine what we do in FY 24. Because 3.725, you're not gonna get that out the door, I don't believe, or much of that in FY 24.
Until I do my math, I might agree with you.
Go do your
Because
math and
that was-
sharpen your
that
pencil.
was 7 and 8,
Mm-hmm,
and that was the cafeteria. So that was one of those things, the anticipation that we would know more about the pandemic mitigation project, but we're not there. But that schedule does sort of take that into account. If you look at in the reddish maroon, schematic design for the pandemic mitigation project was complete in 11/25 of this year, November 23, sorry. If air handlers 5 and 6 do not arrive until later, option B could come into play still, which is the ductwork that we envision for expanding this. If the schematic design shows some of these walls get moved, the ductwork that we're anticipating doesn't necessarily have to fatten the walls. It could go, we could switch the duct size. That requires a different spot in the room where that duct would go. So that would have to take that into account, but we would know more about the schematic design. I don't know if next session, you'd be able to make that decision as to whether it's gonna go forward or not. Design development is not completed until anticipated to be August of 25. So there's that tough situation going on there of what's going on, but these are the interplay of the blue being what we had originally planned. The green here is an option of B of ductwork above the ceiling here, and then the maroon color being the potential expansion. Again, it's there. So if 5 and 6 show up, just putting them in would be no harm in any future movement of walls.
but you have the money from previous appropriations to buy those air handling units 5 and 6. You already have money in the bank for that, unless there's been a cost increase. We did that last year.
And it's a good question, Madam Chair. I mean, remember, we put together these capital bill requests in September, right? And then the first units were supposed to arrive in November. So we do our best job at the time with the information we have, right, to estimate the schedule and when things are going to happen. And again, we still don't have those air handler units, right? And it's February and we still don't have a ship date. So we're doing the best we can. Like I said, we call the manufacturer weekly to make sure we're
That's
raising
the
our
1,
hands.
2, and 3.
That's right.
And supposedly that work was supposed to have been done this past fall.
That's 4. Air handling 4 is the Senate. 1, 2, and 3 is chambers.
Okay.
I feel like we need like a little diagram.
Yeah, you
Joe,
do.
that shows where all of the air
I had
handler
that,
units are.
but that was,
and
well,
names.
I did have a diagram that I have, but this was a shorter presentation. It wasn't all in depth of HVAC alone.
Well, if we had one, I think it'd be nice to provide it to the community.
I
Just
think
for
we passed out copies of it on the tour, but if you didn't make the guided tour.
Right.
So air handling 4 is for what specifically?
The Senate,
Senate chamber? or
first floor.
Senate first floor, 1, 2, and 3,
1, 2, and 3 are the chambers.
and the flag and the
Flag
Cedar
and
Creek.
the Cedar Creek Governor's
And then
Office.
4 is for the Senate committee rooms.
5 and 6 are for the House committee rooms. 4 is Senate.
Senate committee rooms.
Yes.
Right. Troy, did you have your hand?
Nope, I was just trying to.
In the first. So when do you anticipate getting air handler number 4.
That's the one we were waiting on and we were supposed to have had back in the fall.
So is that a 20-week out as well?
It's sitting there.
Is it been
Not
ordered,
longer.
has it been ordered the same time that 1, 2, and 3 have not been ordered yet?
That is correct. They have not been ordered yet.
Has 4 been ordered?
Yeah, we're waiting on that to
Okay.
ship.
John?
Are all phases under a CM contract?
Yes, they are. That whole contract covers everything.
So I want to move on here. So if you can give us what you have in the bank for this project, and what it's been, it just encumbered, what has been planned,
Covered and obligated.
encumbered and obligated. You know that you got some shipping dates for that. And then that will help us figure out the FY '24. Okay? The other piece in terms of taking the moisture out of the air, I want to schedule that at a separate time for you folks to come back this week. Because I don't want to confuse the committee with too much.
The decision does need to be made on that.
Okay. Okay. And is there money involved in that?
It's built into the project already, in a way. I mean, we were looking
The
for.
HVAC system project, you mean?
Yes, because we evaluated the 3, and that comes in life cycle cost in the best. The one that
Yes, it was
Water,
included in
So it
our
was included.
original Request.
That's what started the whole thing.
That's right.
that is correct.
Okay. So we have a few more minutes. Let's keep going.
I have nothing for the Newport Courthouse for timeline. We are in the programming process right now, and also looking at the property.
Okay.
So the planning and programming study is wrapping up. We should have that, I would think, in the next couple of months finished. From that, we'll have a better sense of what we need for a site, right, the requirements for the site. So size, power, all these things we talk about, water, sewer. And then we will put out another land acquisition RFP. The goal is to get that out this summer. And then we'll need to see what responses that we get. There is a hole in the ground in Newport, it's lovingly known as the Newport redevelopment downtown site. They did bid the last time. Unfortunately, we were not able to negotiate to a price that we felt was reasonable for the state of Vermont, and we ended that land acquisition. But again, we're gonna go back out with more refinement in terms of what we need for the site. And then once we have a site, we would move on to schematic design.
Gonna have a new mayor up there in Newport.
So,
Maybe that'll help.
so you have $1 million already, and some of that was targeted to a site acquisition.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
And you still have $1 million in the bank.
We've spent a little bit on planning, but I'm not sure how much.
That's on my head.
And what's the 750 in FY '24 gonna get you?
That is assuming we have a site that's for design.
That's assuming you have a site.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
We could do a little bit of schematic design work without a site, but at that point in time, we really have to know whether it's where the site is and what type of site it is. Hillside, flat, the likes of that.
Questions? So the next one was,
Stormwater.
stormwater. We wanted to know how much of the 1.5 you can get out the door, how many projects. And we did not give you any money last year, but it's in the ARPA money. In the
$600,000 in ARPA funding. And that's basically going to design. We have 7 sites, and we have just received back our proposals for design. We're going through those. What we put in our RFP for our request for proposal, and what we have for feedback that I've seen so far is the people are looking, the design firms are looking to meet our schedule. And our schedule is to have everything complete by December of 2025. So the process will take you, once we have a contract in place with a designer or multiple designers, because there's several sites throughout the state. So we're evaluating that. We'll go into schematic design, design development, and construction documents, take care of any permitting that is required, and then get the work out. Some sites are relatively easy and simple to do. Montpelier here is a hard site. Middlesex, the old public safety, the Sarah site, is a third of an acre, over 3 acres. So that one is basically, the cheapest way out of that one is how to shave pavement, really. If we can shave off a third of an acre, we'll be all set, and we don't have to worry about installing stormwater.
So how much of the 600,000 have you tied up?
Right now, I think we haven't did any of it yet because the proposals are sitting on our desk right now. But I believe we're going to get through most of it. I have not read all the proposals, so I don't know all the total dollar amounts. The staff are going to go through a selection committee to select the bidders and move forward with that.
And then the 1.5 and the 1.5 over the next 2 years is to go strictly for construction?
Yes. And so when, like Middlesex, that could be equipment that goes out the door. That one could actually be completed this summer. The one here in Montpelier is going to take some surveying and borings and everything else as to where to put it and how to install it.
Questions?
Yeah, what's the buyout cost? You know, if one of these projects, we said this is gonna cost a lot of money, like Montpelier, like.
I forget what that was. We had that 2 years ago, I think, when we were here. We can get that to you now.
We had one, there was an A&R project that you did a buyout, right?
We haven't done the buyout, but A&R provided there is a buyout price per acre that A&R has included with stormwater rules and regulations. That would be one of the things that our design team will be looking at when you go through and assess what you have to do to comply with the 3 acre rule. Is the buyout plan a better option?
So that would be a later step in the design process?
That would be part of the design process to evaluate that, yes.
Got it, okay, thank you.
So let's move on here. We got the White River Courthouse. Is that, we just needed clarity, is that in construction?
It is not, it's in design right now. We had a hold on that project for years. Due to funding, we pushed it off. Our architects right now are working on it. We're also looking to bring in a construction manager because we're going to have to do some type of a temporary fit up for court to continue while we work on that building. And so that's what the construction manager will be doing. We're looking to have our design development completed end of July of this year. And then with that, our construction manager can start helping to price things out and look at lease space. Because they don't have additional property there, state-owned property to do a temporary courthouse, courtroom in. So then we'll bid out the temporary work. We're looking to do that in January of 24. And then we'll also shortly thereafter bid out the construction work for the courthouse itself. Move the court out. And then start construction in July, towards the end of July of 24. And hoping to have that all wrapped up by the end of 25.
So end of July, calendar year 24, you would start construction.
Yes.
So do you have enough money in the bank? We've been putting money here. Do you have enough money in the bank to, because we've put in 1.5 million already. Do you have enough money in the bank to get you to construction?
It all depends what the lease space is and how much fit up I have to do. So I don't know, because although in a temporary situation like this, we're not looking to do a complete courtroom, but there are still some standards for the courts that, you know, if we're doing a bench, a witness stand at different elevations for the jury box, that meaning the jury room, but it's not a typical courtroom setting that we would have. So temporary is a bit different.
So I'm gonna jump in a little bit because Joe was not part of Newport. So when the Newport courthouse was not able to be opened because they had some concerns around COVID and air, we did look at possibly fitting up an alternative location for them. The cost estimate on that was $1 million. So while, let's just say courthouses have a lot of different requirements, even in a temporary setting, and they get very expensive. So one of the things I'm gonna be doing is trying to work with the judicial branch to either find some other alternative method that does not require police space or swing space, or really working hard with them to reduce the requirements. They're pretty rigid on that, even on a temporary basis, so it gets very expensive.
So you have 1.5 million. If you had to do a fit up for a temporary space, the 1.5 million might not cover all that, so you would need some of the 2 million in FY24 for that.
Well, because you're paying for design right now, Joe, right? And at the
Right.
same time, we're trying to fit up space, and again, my estimate in Newport was $1 million.
Right. And that was for the fit up, was not the design cost.
That's correct,
For that.
that was for fit up for that.
Okay. That helps. And is that, I think, was that it?
Well, we have one more, Madam Chair, I believe,
Which one was that? Not St. Albans, was it?
Ledge IT.
Ledge IT, but we've,
Oh, that's tomorrow.
that's tomorrow.
Okay.
We've scheduled time for that. So, those are the ones we had today, that I have, right? Questions for the committee? Are people confused? Did this help?
Yes.
We'll have more questions as we go.
I don't think it helped really with finding projects that don't seem important.
It helped in cash flow.
Right.
We need to look at the cash flow. And we need to look at how much they're requesting in FY24 and how much they're requesting in 25. Because there's some adjustments that could be made, possibly. That's what we need to look at when we do markup. Even though they may have requested 2 million for something, I may not get that out the door in FY24. We can cut that back to 1.5. We can cut that back to 1.8. We can cut it back to 1.2. See where I'm going with this, folks? You don't zero it out, but you kind of look, what did they got in the bank? How far is that gonna get them? What they currently have, how far is that gonna get them in FY24?
That was helpful, knowing
And
what's
then-
in the bank.
And then you look at what's being requested in FY24. They may not be able to get that all out the door. And maybe you bump some of that to FY25 and cut back on FY25. There's a lot of moving pieces here. Okay,
Just put it simply, we're not talking about reducing the project costs, we're talking about how it flows through the system.
because you want to tie up money when you got some projects elsewhere. Okay? So we'll have you guys back.
We're happy to be back.
We'll be back. I want to schedule some time, if you could hook in with Phil, schedule some time for the system for drawing out the humidity in the air in this building. So we can talk about those 3 options and the cost for that. Wayne?
I'm just curious on, handler in place, the noise, is this the noise, will it increase here,
No. So,
or so.
If we're looking to do away with these, ultimately, to go overhead, so the airflow would be a lot quieter.
In that interim time,
Interim?
when you had a possibility to put higher volume through there, did you dial it so that you could get to an acceptable noise level?
We're at that right now. Because if we go any higher, the ductwork in the wall across the room,
So the whistle,
it vibrates, and you can't hear it. We already tried that.
okay, let's take a quick 5-minute break, okay? Because we're going to shift gears to H102. We have a new draft that Becky's going to walk us through.